There was so little, in fact, at every crime scene. After each killing, the gunman vanished into thin air. Detectives were mystified.
We had no physical description. We had no good eyewitnesses. How do you draw up a plan to find a ghost?
In a desperate move, Police Chief Moose asked the public for help.
We're still convinced that people have seen something. We want to talk to them. We want to follow up.
A tip line was immediately overwhelmed by callers who were sure they knew the sniper.
We had over 100,000 tips come in to the tip line, which is astronomical.
Detectives began working around the clock to follow every worthwhile lead. Meanwhile, Assistant Chief Drew Tracy scrutinized the sniper's every move in search of a pattern.
They were close to major roadways. We realized there were strip malls, and we realized that certain stores were consistent at these places. We also realized that they knew the traffic patterns in the area of Montgomery County.
Rather than get stuck in heavy southbound traffic, the killer, or killers, traveled north after a morning shooting.
They went to the path of least resistance.
Based on those movements, police devised a scheme to trap the sniper. It was called the concentric circle plan. An immediate response team will be ready to deploy within 1 minute of an emergency call.
If we got the information within a minute, the most they could have gone was a half mile to a mile, whether it was on foot or in a vehicle.
Police teams would then create a trap consisting of a series of widening circles around the area.
And our goal was to be on scene within 2 to 3 minutes immediately after receiving information. And basically, we would try to roadblock every one of these locations with a uniformed presence. We would flood internally with plainclothes operatives.
Roadblocks began to spring up everywhere.
We needed to lock them into a certain location.
Police searched white vans and every other suspicious vehicle. One of the biggest manhunts in US history was underway. And yet, the sniper seemed to stay one step ahead, slipping away after every shooting.
We would get ourselves just about where we thought we had things under control when something would happen in another jurisdiction.
The high kill rate suggested a particular kind of suspect.
We were dealing with a trained individual. Hunters have this expertise. Military has this expertise. Trained law enforcement would have this expertise.
Based on the tight cluster of shootings on the first 2 days, police had been looking for suspects in that part of Montgomery County. But the Caroline Sewell case in Fredericksburg, Virginia, had expanded the attack zone tenfold. The killer could be anywhere, and as the weekend approached, an entire region held its breath. What would be next? The killer might not be a local resident, as they had first suspected. The safety of school children was a particular concern.
I had 3 young children. I ran them through parking lots. I made them go down on the floorboard of the car when I got gas.
Throughout the weekend, school and police officials debated whether or not schools should close. It was decided that schools would remain open, but the pupils would stay indoors.
I had my kids telling me, Mom, you have to go to work. You have to go to work till you catch them. We need to go back out for recess. So, it's a different perspective, but it was all that you could think about.
So far, none of the shootings had happened near schools. But that was about to change. 13-year-old Iron Brown had been kicked off his school bus the week before.
He'd gotten in trouble for eating candy on the bus, and his aunt had to take him to school.
Iron's aunt dropped him off at school an hour early because she had to get to work. News of the sniper shooting was constantly on the radio.
No incidents, no activities at the school. Very safe day for young people.
She turns around and there he is lying on the ground, bleeding. Iran Brown was really losing consciousness in the car. His aunt was a nurse, she was trained, and she called the hospital ahead of time, and she was racing through traffic. And she kept saying to him, hang in there, I love you.
When I first saw Iron, he was trying to die, and I wasn't sure whether we were going to be able to turn that around or not.
This is our home. This is our community. We took an oath to protect and serve. And these guys come in and make a mockery.
Here, you see the looks of people
out here. It's just uncontrolled fear right now.
Once that child had been shot in our neighboring county of Prince George's, it was like things had escalated, and as bad as they were, and we didn't think they could get much worse, they did get worse.
We truthfully are a bit nervous about just standing still. Like now, I'm standing here with you, and I'm kind of looking around because I'm thinking, really, should I stand here? I mean, I've got a car behind me and a building over behind you, and so there is some protection, if you will, but again, you don't know.
Nobody was safe, and I think people had a pretty good grasp of that.
I mean, you're supposed to feel safe when you're right in front of the school. And somebody gets shot and you gotta get rushed to the hospital, it's kind of scary.
This is just unbelievable. And there's no sense you can put to this. I mean, it's just a random act of violence in the most serene neighborhood you can possibly have.
We were pressed more and more. In fact, my own wife started to not believe me, saying, are our kids safe? And I couldn't answer that because I didn't know.
Ever since everything started, I haven't been allowed to go anywhere. I've been in my house. They just cancel the games.
Wait a second. This is a grown-up softball league.
Mm-hmm.
You're adults.
Mm-hmm.
They've canceled that too?
Yes.
Why?
For the safety of us.
We talked about wherever you are, whatever you're doing, when you're coming to school, coming off the bus, look around. Look around. And I've been doing that at service stations and all kinds of things, everywhere I go.
Parents felt like their children weren't safe, and they weren't. No one knew who would be shot next.
No, they generally take the bus right in front of the door, but since the sniper is around, we don't know what's going on. I have to take them to school myself.
Well, we have to go on. We can't keep our kids away from their education just because of this.
Because we all need fresh air and the shades are down. And I'd go to my friend's house, but really I'm not allowed outside anymore.
Hopefully this craziness stops today.
Knowing the full effect of these events on the community he had vowed to protect, the pressure began to mount for Chief Moose.
Stepping over the line, shooting a kid. I guess it's getting to be really, really personal now.
Many were startled to see the police chief cry, but those close to the investigation understood. The police felt as though they were failing the community, as they were unable to stop this elusive and ruthless killer. During 5 days in October 2002, there had been 7 shooting incidents in the Washington, D.C. area. They had all involved a single round from a high-powered rifle. The local police force seemed unable to put a stop to the shooting spree. However, the FBI brought in greater resources to search for the serial killer. A $200,000 reward was offered for information leading to an arrest. Back at the scene of schoolboy Iron Brown's shooting, investigators undertook a forensic walk, stepping slowly, shoulder to shoulder, through the area.
And 2 of them discovered what they thought looked like a flattened out area in the shrubs where maybe somebody had been laying, and they pursued that area much more intensely and with a metal rake found the shell casing.
They also found a pen barrel with the ink cartridge removed. It was sent to a forensic lab to check it for DNA. But the biggest find of the day was a mysterious tarot card.
And it said, "For you, Mr. Police, code, call me God, do not release to the press." So they were using the code, call me God. It was almost like a calling card saying that it's us again and we did it. At that point in time, they did not ask for anything, and that's a scary situation.
The suspects made it very clear that they did not want the media notified with regard to this.
The task force wanted to honor the killer's request in order to establish communication, but the media were everywhere. No secret was safe. Police were determined to keep the tarot card evidence away from the press.
The next day, the tarot card information was leaked, and it pretty much made the front page of the Washington Post. This is the kind of reporting that, while I understand wanting to get a big story, can be very devastating to a case.
While the investigation seemed stalled, there was a spot of good news.
We have been taking care of a young man.
Iron Brown, the 13-year-old shot at school that morning, was going to live. Shell casings from his shooting strongly suggested that a Bushmaster rifle had been used. a weapon that could be lethal in the hands of somebody with little training.
Thank you, Chief. Sorry to keep everyone waiting tonight. I talked about that you don't have to have a military training or be an expert marksman with this gun.
The investigators had to be careful about information released to the media. At one stage, Mike Bouchard had noted that all the victims had been shot in the torso. Dean Myers was a civil engineer who had been decorated for service in Vietnam. He was on his way from Virginia to Maryland.
He was leaving work, and he just stopped to get gas because he had a long ride home back to Gaithersburg. And he got out of the car, and he's pumping gas.
A .223 caliber bullet ripped through his skull. It was October the 9th.
If you get a bullet wound like that to the head, it doesn't matter what you do, you're dead. There's nothing we can do.
2 days later, Ken Bridges was killed, also at a petrol station in Virginia. On October the 14th, the sniper struck again in Virginia. Ted and Linda Franklin had just bought some shelves and were loading them into their vehicle. When Ted moved towards the front of the vehicle to adjust a seat, Linda walked to the rear. She was standing still when the fatal bullet hit. It was another shot to the head.
The right side of Linda Franklin's head was completely blown off.
She was the 11th victim of the DC sniper.
And we felt with each new one that we weren't being successful at doing our job and protecting this community.
But at this shooting, a witness came forward.
Now, that was the first good information we had of a possible suspect, as well as a good descriptor of a vehicle.
Part of a cream or white in color Chevy van.
Matthew Dowdy said he was walking out of the hardware store when he saw the killer.
A Mideastern style male, complected, crouching down, taking a shot.
He described a white or cream-colored van with a burnt-out rear light. An alert went out to the public.
We do want people to continue to watch for things that are out of place, strange behavior. Report that. I'm pleased to say that people continue to call our tip line.
There are more bad guys than there are cops, but there aren't more bad guys than there are good guys. So when you put the good guys out there and you ask them to help you with a task, it's a force multiplier, and that's what we were counting on in this case.
2 days later, a detective was reviewing the surveillance tapes from the hardware store. At 9:21 p.m., Dowdy appeared on the in-store security videotape, 3 minutes after the shooting.
When they realized that this was a false lookout and that false suspect information.
The eyewitness turned out to be a hoax, just someone looking for media attention. 2 weeks after the shooting began, the investigators were back to square one. All the possible suspects from the surveillance tape recorded during Linda Franklin's shooting were eliminated. Sleep-deprived and frustrated, the investigators knew that to catch the sniper, they'd have to work even harder.
You just couldn't walk away from the case. I didn't want to go off shift. Your bosses had to send you home. Get your sleep, you're going to have to come back tomorrow, it's a new day. And you'd go home, and on your way home, there was another shooting incident just around the corner.
Before this case, Barney Forsyth had been planning to retire from the police force, but those plans were now on hold.
It would have been very difficult for me to walk out the door and turn this over to somebody else.
Then a lead came from an unexpected place. Tacoma in the state of Washington, on the other side of the country.
But again, we encourage everyone to call. Don't assume we have your information. Do not assume that the information you have is no good.
As Robert Holmes watched the coverage of the DC sniper shootings, he had an alarming revelation.
He somehow has this gut feeling that his friend John Muhammad is behind this.
John Muhammad had been his buddy in the army. He owned a long-range rifle, just like the one shown in the news reports. And here was the clincher. John had an estranged wife who had taken custody of their children and moved to the Washington, D.C. area.
So he calls the tip line, and his tip gets completely lost.
Ironically, the sniper wanted